Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 144 of the Veterinary Behaviour Chat podcast. The reason we're chuckling is because I did say that we've got a meowing cat in the background, and right on cue, as I press record, there he is. But I think he's just about to settle down by my feet, so he hopefully should stop meowing. Yes, so welcome, guys. Welcome to episode 144. And this episode, we've got another one of our super popular 15-minute speed coaching episodes. And I'm really delighted to have the lovely Olivia Bury with me today, who is joining us all the way from Australia. So I'm going to let Olivia introduce herself in a second. But before we do that, I'm just going to explain the rules of the game when it comes to 15-minute speed coaching. So we are going to chat about a topic for exactly 15 minutes. I have put 15 minutes on my timer. And as soon as Olivia asks her question, we're going to hit the timer and we will chat about that topic for exactly 15 minutes. We might come to a resolution, we might not. But we usually end up having a pretty good chat about the important aspects of the question. But sometimes it leaves us on a bit of a cliffhanger, so that's where we'll have to leave it. So welcome, Olivia. Really lovely to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I've been listening for a long time and I've learned so much from your podcast. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I know that even if we can't come to a perfect solution, and obviously, especially in the realm of behavior, I think there's always, a lot of gray areas or, there's never kind of one simple answer. I know it'll still be really helpful.
Yeah, brilliant. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're practicing, where your main focus lies?
So I am in South Australia and I am a GP vet, but I do have a really big passion for veterinary behaviour. Last year I set my veterinary memberships in behaviour and I found that really useful and really satisfying. And whilst I still love lots of the aspects of GP, and I find that in behaviour, obviously I think it's really important to look at the whole animal and make sure that you are really being holistic in your approach. Definitely behaviour is my biggest passion and what I like to do the most. I think I find it very rewarding.
Amazing. And congrats on passing your memberships. I took my memberships back in 2021, so I know exactly what you would have been through last year. So it's always a big step, isn't it, to go back to studying and sitting for yet more exams. So huge congrats for that.
Thank you. I did find it interesting, obviously in vet school, everyone's sitting exams at the same time. So everyone knows that you're having exams. And with the memberships, I almost felt like I didn't want to tell anyone I was sitting them because I was really nervous about the possibility of failing and, not having a whole bunch of peers that were also in the same boat. So it was very interesting, but I did learn a lot and I did enjoy it.
Yay. Yeah, no, it's actually a really, really great foundational knowledge exam. I thought it was so helpful. It really sort of set me up on my behavior journey as well. And to be fair, studying for the memberships really helped so much when I then came to study for boards, because a lot of that foundational stuff I'd written notes on and I'd done all the things. So it's a good path to follow, whether you then decide to pursue a residency or not. I know many of my colleagues that are based in Australia also started by sitting their membership. So yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
Right. So we've got a bit of a different question today, and I'm so in love with this question. I got very excited when Olivia sent her sort of questions in. And we're coming a little bit away from, I guess, the topic of super clinical behavior medicine, although it is very much still part of everything. But we're kind of focusing a little bit on the business side of running a veterinary behavior business today. So without further ado, hang on, I'm going to get my timer up. Why does my phone always want to sync things when I'm in the middle of this? Right, here we are. We've got 15 minutes on the clock. So I'm going to press start. And then, Olivia, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so kind of a big question, but I am specifically interested in your opinions on how to run behaviour consults, most specifically in terms of how long do you allow for your initial consult, but then also your revisit consults. Do you have a set revisit consult fee and time allocation, or does that vary depending on when you last saw the patient or perhaps owner perception of how long they think they may need, or, finances as well?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting one, because this has definitely sort of changed and evolved for me over time. So when I was doing my residency, there was kind of a very sort of set pattern, I guess, of doing the behavior consults. And this was very, very much based on how both of my mentors did it. So Dr. Kirsty Sexel in Australia and Dr. Teresa Porter in the US. Now, Kirsty, for example, she did 3-hour initial consults, whereas Teresa did like 2-hour initial consults. So I started off with doing 2-hour initial consultations. However, over time, there were a few things that I noticed. One was that is a long time for many, many clients and many dogs and cats. I mean, I would only see cats in their home, so I think for the cats it was less. But for a dog to come into an unfamiliar environment, seeing them in person, that's a long time for them to kind of be under some degree of stress. And I also felt that there was a moment where the caregivers also just switched off, right? There was no more going in. So but I stuck to that kind of formula for the duration of my residency. But after my residency, I actually rethought things. And I now offer anything from a 30-minute consult up to a 2-hour consult, depending on what people need. Now, I won't do an initial consult with 30 minutes. I just don't think there's enough time. But I do sometimes, or I do actually quite often, do initial consults that are an hour in length. And I often feel that I can get pretty much everything I want to across in that hour without overwhelming the caregivers too much. And I think that's also a little bit of a matter of practice, right? I think when you've done a number of cases, like at the beginning, my first residency cases, there was like so much that I felt that I needed the information I needed to get, and the time it took me to sort of process that information. Whereas I think the more experience you get, the more quickly you can condense things and bring them to, like, what are the most important things I need to be considering in this case, and then kind of talking through that. My follow-ups, rule of thumb, tend to be 30 minutes. I have some where we do an hour if they're very complex cases, or if things have transpired in the meantime, sort of since the initial consult or since the last consult, if there's been like physical workup, or if new behaviors have emerged, or if sort of environment or social situations have changed, then we might do an hour for a follow-up. But if it's a medication review or just a check-in, then I think 30 minutes are usually very much sufficient. And then, yeah, sometimes I do kind of let the client lead a little bit with what they want. Some people want 2 hours. They absolutely want to have 2 hours. And that's also great. We fill that time, and I make sure I try and provide value throughout those whole 2 hours. So yeah, it's a mixture of me-led and client-led, and a little bit of evolution over time as to what I think works best for everybody involved.
Yeah. And when a client calls to book a revisit, say, do you then in that admin conversation say, how long would you like the revisit to be? Or do you, allow a maximum amount of time, but then if you finish up sooner, then only charge for the minimum amount of time, that sort of thing?
So what usually happens is the client submits the follow-up questionnaire. I don't do much admin. That's where I have my wonderful admin assistant, Ben. He does all the admin for me. But if he sort of reads through the follow-up questionnaire and there are things that that maybe he flags, then I might say to them, hey, Ben, why don't you suggest like a 60-minute follow-up for these guys? It sounds like there's a lot to discuss. If they only want 30, then that's fine. But then, I'll kind of make it clear we can only discuss what we can discuss in 30 minutes. What I have done in the past is I have had occasions where we've booked for a 30-minute follow-up consult, but we've been done after like almost 10 or 15 minutes, either because there was something like really significant, we want to switch from one medication to another, or not even so much that, but there was something where it's just like, okay, I think for the next period of time, we just need to do this one thing. And that's maybe only taken 10 or 15 minutes. And then I'll say, look, we've only used 10 or 15 minutes of these 30 minutes. Let's do the second half of those 10 or 15 minutes in whatever, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whenever we think next. So I feel I'm very fair with my time. Like if somebody books 30 minutes, then that's what they get, you know. And if we don't use that whole 30 minutes up, if we do like 25 minutes and we're done, then that's fine. But if we only do like 10 or 15 minutes, then I'll say, actually, guys, we've only done 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Let's book a second 10-minute slot in a couple of weeks and see where we're at.
And how often are you, I know obviously very variable too, but what is your general time frame, say, between your initial consult and your next revisit, and then kind of moving on from there?
So I'm a little bit fastidious about keeping in really close contact with my clients after the initial consult, especially if we've started psychopharmacology. Also the others, you know, where I want to make sure that they're able to implement management strategies and that sort of thing, especially where there's maybe risk, you know, we're making sure that management strategies are truly providing safety. But especially if we've started someone on psychopharmacology, I'll have myself and Ben check in with those caregivers every couple of days for the first 2 weeks, which is the time that we expect to see the most side effects. I will then that is part of my initial consultation, that kind of and we do it on WhatsApp, so it's kind of really easy to do. It does, you know, it doesn't take sitting down and writing an email or whatever. It's quite a sort of an in the moment check-in type thing, and I feel a lot of the clients really like that. My first follow-up will usually be somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks after the initial, like a proper booked, paid for, structured follow-up will be, around that time. So sometimes it takes a moment for them to get hold of the meds, and once they start the meds, it'll be 4 to 6 weeks after starting meds for the first one. But I have that initial 2-week period where I kind of know what's happening in those first 2 weeks.
And for your cases, do you see telemed or telehealth cases? And if so, are there some clients that you see specifically just telehealth, you never see them in person? Or if they do, you know, say live in the area and they can see you, but maybe it's not convenient for them to come in frequently, do you have a general rule of how often you like to see them in person?
This is a great question. So I'm doing a lot more telehealth at the moment, and that is partly because kind of where I'm located, because I'm in the UAE. I also work a lot in the UK because I'm MRCVS and an RCVS specialist. The UK cases that I would see via telehealth or teleguidance, they're all referrals from GP vet. So I would never see directly a client, only virtually. So I'll make sure that the GP vet has seen that patient in person and that there's, you know, been a physical health check and so on. And then I will get a bunch of videos usually, and in some instances floor plans, or I'll have the caregiver kind of go around with their phone and actually just film their house and like tell me everything, like this is the kitchen, this is the bedroom, and so on. There's a crate here, there's the food bowl here. And I think there are pros and cons to both. So obviously when I'm in my practice in the UAE, I will see dogs in person in the clinic. If it's appropriate to do so. I think if the dogs are extremely, really, really fearful, either of car journeys, of unfamiliar environments, or if there's really like a high bite risk, then we might also decide to do that via telehealth, and you know, then make sure that we see them at some point for a health check, for a kind of a physical health check. I think there are definitely some pros to the sort of telehealth side of things. I think, you get more focus from the caregiver because they're not so worried about what their dog's doing. They're not kind of distracted by that. And a lot of times for some patients, that's just more appropriate. But I do love seeing them in person because sometimes you just can't see the nuance of behavior when you're doing it just by telehealth. So my preference would always be to see them in person if it's appropriate to do so. But yeah, I think just the way the world is at the moment and the amount of people that need help from a veterinary behaviorist, I can't see them all in person. So it's a bit of a trade-off and a bit of a compromise, yeah.
And do you get your clients to fill in a questionnaire before every revisit consult?
Yeah, absolutely. before every revisit. And I think there was a question you had earlier about like after how much time would it no longer be a follow-up? At what point is it like a new revisit, a new initial consult again? And for me, that time frame is 12 months. So if I haven't seen the patient for 12 months and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, remember us, then I'm a little bit like, okay, it's been 12 months since I last saw you. Like so much could have changed. We need to kind of book another, almost like an initial consult that would be at least an hour in length. Yeah.
Okay. And are you using AI to help write your reports? And if so, are you finding it helpful?
Not yet, because I'm so rubbish at tech.
Yeah.
So for a time there, when I was doing my residency, I actually used a dictation app where I would just dictate my report into, and it would type it up, and that worked in some cases. In some cases it didn't, like they couldn't spell Zilkeen, and then I'd have to go in and spell it again, and Feliway, all those things. I absolutely have to jump on the AI bandwagon. I'm very aware of that. It's just not been a priority for me. And sometimes it's funny, when I'm writing reports, sometimes it's actually the report writing itself that helps me just reflect on that case. And as I write my reports down, and I usually I list my diagnoses, and then I will list whatever sort of behavioral signs I've seen that are relevant to that diagnosis. And sometimes the process of writing the report, although it's not fun and it's time consuming and it can be a little bit of a pain in the backside, for me at least, there is sometimes a value in writing those reports that just help me like think, oh yeah, what was it about this case that was particular? And maybe I'll do a WhatsApp to Ben and say, hey, can you just send a fecal score sheet to these clients, because I do want a really like clear. So yeah, report writing is a big topic, that one.
And say for a 30-minute revisit consult, how much time do you allow for yourself to prep for the consult, do the consult, and write your report?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So for the 30-minute consults, they're usually cases that I'm pretty well up to speed with, and clients that I'm in touch with a lot. So I will read their follow-up questionnaire, which is much, much shorter than our initial consult questionnaire. So it's way shorter. So I'll read through that. I'll have a look at any videos or pictures that they've sent in. That probably takes about 10 minutes in total. And then I don't write a separate Word document report for the follow-ups. I will go into my practice management system, and I'll also almost do just like a clinical history, like history notes. So I'll just do like a normal visit notes. This is what we did. And then I always make sure I put a plan 1, 2, 3, 4 at the bottom. So it's a much less time consuming. And again, that takes me about 10 minutes. So for a 30-minute consult, total time spent would probably be somewhere around 45 to 50 minutes.
Good. And how much information do you send the clients after a revisit consultation?
So I kind of touch on the high points, like this is better, this is worse, we've still got work to do here. And then at the bottom, I do my plan, which is kind of my summary, and I will bullet point that. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So plan, maybe change medications or stick to whatever current medications. Then, maybe there's a physical health, something or other that we've discussed that we want some further investigation to. Then I might just kind of remember this management piece is really important. So I'll put usually about somewhere between 5 and 8 bullet points after the follow-up of this is what we discussed, please just remember this. And then at the end, I put when I expect the next follow-up appointment to be after that one.
Okay. And what about, like, say, if you've got a client who requests to have a shorter consult time because they feel like things are going quite well for their pet, but when you're going through the questionnaire, say you think maybe things are not actually going as smoothly as you would like, how do you kind of approach that with the client without them perhaps thinking that you want to have a longer consult because you want to make more money, sort of thing? Yeah.
That's a great question, actually. And I mean, I'm going to say I can usually get most things done in 30 minutes. If I do feel that, and if I know I have some clients where I say, guys, we need 60 minutes here. There's too much, and they'll be like, yeah, fine. And then there'll be other clients where I know, if I ask or if I suggest a 60-minute consult instead of 30, that they might be a bit put off by that. So what I often do when we actually get into the consult, when we get face-to-face on screen, I'll say, listen, guys, we've only got 30 minutes and there's a lot we need to get through. So we might not get to everything. And if they're, oh no, that's the timer.
I think the time is what I'm going to take into my consult so I don't go over time. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
But I used to do that actually, especially during my residency cases when I was still very kind of, I could go on for hours. I would say I'd oftentimes have one of my nurses in with me, and I would say to them, can you set the alarm for an hour and 45 so that when the alarm goes off, I know I've only got 15 minutes left to wrap things up. So it is a good strategy for sure.
I think I'll definitely have to do that because I am a bit of a talker and I do find it hard to finish on time. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's always more that you can talk about. Yeah, always.
Yeah. But that's, I think, where the danger comes in, right? But I agree. And I'm also a talker. I mean, as you can tell from my podcast, I love talking, right? I'm like that with clients as well. I talk. But I have found that sometimes less is more. And, sometimes when I rein myself back and I say, guys, we're just going to literally focus on these 3 things for now. And then we'll, and a lot of it is maybe more about relationship building, showing empathy, showing that you understand what it is they're going through, rather than overloading them with things to do. That I think has worked quite well for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
We didn't actually get to that much, but I hope it was helpful.
No, it definitely was. And yeah, I think some really good points, because I agree. I think that rapport is so important for these kinds of consults. And I think that's where I do find I can spend quite a lot of time, but also trying to balance that between providing useful information without being overloading, but also not going hugely over time and then, perhaps not charging for that. Yeah. Keeping it fair for everyone.
Yeah. And I think there's a fine line, right? Is that doggy?
That is my dog. She is eyeing off my leftover dinner.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll finish in a sec. But I think just one last sentence. I think it's really important, and I think everyone has to kind of understand this for themselves. It's really important to value your time and be a little bit mindful and protective of your time, while still feeling that you're providing what it is that you need to give. I've got some clients that have been with me for years, and if I do 35 or 38 minutes with those guys, I don't care, and we'll often they're like, we're at time, and I'm like, fine, it's fine, I've got another 5 or 10 minutes for you guys. And that's just part of that relationship building for me. I never want to feel like I'm being really stingy or a stickler with my time. However, I've also had clients that have abused that, where I have then become a little bit more direct, I guess, with, okay, we're finishing on the dot. But you'll also know who those clients are. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. That was really
helpful. My pleasure. So I'm going to let you go and give your doggy her dinner or your dinner.
Well, it's actually my dinner. Yeah, that's it. She would love that.
Good. But thank you so much, Olivia. What a brilliant question. I think it's going to be super useful for so many people. So thank you so much for joining me. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. And I will see you next week for episode 145. Bye for now.
Thank you.